After 2 videos of ragging on Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it all ends here. Has the latter part of this game changed my opinions, or is this game actually that much of a disappointment? Spoiler alert, I'll be talking about some of the content at the end of the main game, so here's 5 seconds to click off the video. Let me start by saying this, and I don't doubt that you've heard or thought this before, but Pokemon Scarlet and Violet has some of the best storytelling out of the entire franchise. Hands down, better than Sun and Moon, and very close to Black and White. I'm not talking about the 4 storylines individually. I mean, as a collective, these are some of the best that Game Freak has ever thought up. Starfall Street. A plan to disband a group of bullied students that decide to rally together and stand up for one another against the bullies. Sounds simple, right? Well, it is. But therein lies the excellence and relatability of the story. Sure, we've had something similar in the past with Team Skull, although they had a more delinquent cause due to their members failing island challenges. So I wouldn't exactly put them in the same group. But both of them share a similar sense of camaraderie, of a collective group of people bonding together. I'm sure that growing up, everyone has had their fair share of bullies. So seeing this in a Pokemon game, of all things, is so surreal, yet makes so much sense. It never really made sense to me that we were supposed to believe that these kids didn't have their own internal issues. It's nice now that we finally get to see their side of things and how not everything is always happy rainbows. They'd been working as a team without their leader for the longest time, and the reveal of Penny having been their leader as well as the one that was conspiring against them in a way to get them to return to their student lives was a magical moment. A reunion of friends, all sharing the same goal, to fit in. Here's one that doesn't fit in. Arven. Arven's purpose during your journey was to nurse his Mabostiff back to health after an incident in Area 0 had rendered it weakened. By defeating 5 Titan Pokemon and retrieving their Herba Mystica and feeding them to his Mabostiff, it gradually does get better, and eventually back to a regular Mabostiff by the final Herba Mystica. Overall though, this storyline was not that great. I mean, sure, the payout for each Titan battle was amazing. Seeing the deep connection that Arven has with his Mabostiff was heartwarming. But as for the Titan battles themselves, they weren't anything to cry home about. These Titan battles felt very akin to the Totem battles from Sun and Moon, but worse. Just super buffed Pokemon bosses that weren't even super buffed. I could find more enjoyment and challenge out of battling the Totem Pokemon over these Titans. These could have purely been the Paradox variants of Pokemon to make them more interesting. It was odd that Iron Treads was the only Paradox Pokemon out of the bunch. And although a canonical reason was explained for it during this final storyline of the game, I would have thought it'd be more interesting if Iron Treads wasn't the only one, but the start of the Paradox Pokemon leakage from Area 0. But instead, we got the one Paradox and the rest were normal Pokemon. Arven was a great character though, no doubt about that. As for the bosses of Team Star and Penny as well, each of them have their own distinct personalities that make them feel so realistic and relatable that just makes you like them. Speaking of characters that make you like them, Nemona is one of, if not the best rival in all of Pokemon. But I've already spoken her praises before in the last couple videos I've made. No, what I will focus on now is the Elite Four and Champion. The Elite Four is usually the climax of a Pokemon game. You know, the final bosses of each game. But at least, for me, they didn't really feel like that in this game. If I were to rank the storylines in order, I would put Victory Road at the very bottom. Out of all the storylines, it is the most generic, just synonymous with Pokemon. But in terms of the Elite Four Champion battles, they were just uninteresting or too easy. Now, I am well aware it isn't the grand finale of Scarlet and Violet, but the tension was non-existent, even before knowing what the final chapter entailed. It was because of how uneventful it all felt, with a lack of a proper victory road or some dramatic rooms to drive it. Now, what is the grand finale of Scarlet and Violet? If Victory Road felt so uninteresting, then what could it be? The Way Home. This is the story arc that takes this game's narratives from pretty alright to pretty fucking amazing. Throughout the game, the regional professor, Sada Arturo, urges you, the player, to take care of a weakened Koraidon or Miraidon. You then discover that you can get them to regain some of their power by feeding them Herba Mystica, so this coincides with Arven's story. After feeding the Pokemon all 5 Herba Mystica, the professor then tells you to go meet them in the Great Crater of Paldea, aka Area 0. Somewhere along the road, you learn that the professor and Arvin have the relationship of parent and child, and that Arvin feels as though he's been neglected for the better part of his life, with the professor not coming home and instead focusing on their research. Once you make it down to the Zero Lab where the professor is, they reveal that they're an AI created by the professor, that the real one had died a long time ago, and that this one was made to fulfill their wishes of bringing Pokemon of different eras together so they can coexist. How do they do that? The professor had used the terrestrial phenomenon to not only create the AI that you're talking to, but also a time machine. Crazy, right? And as common sense would tell you, two things from different times don't exactly mesh well together, so it's up to us to stop it from doing further damage. When we succeed, the professor decides to go to their respective era and stop the time machine, because it can't be stopped otherwise, ending this game's story. Okay, maybe Arvin was being neglected. Arvin is probably the most disappointed in this ending. Years of his life wondering what his parents were doing that could be so important to skip out on time with their son. Finally finding out what it was, learning of their death, and their robot counterpart saying a few words, then proceeding to tip out on him as the cherry on top. This moment stood as one that was surprising. Not what the professor was, but that Game Freak would decide to write this story in a mainline game. I would go so far as to put this in the same league as the implications you can gather from Ultra Ruin from Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon. The tone of the writing. What the emotions of the characters must have been after having learned all of this. It served the overall story of Scarlet and Violet really well. Normally I wouldn't even care about the side characters' backstories. But yeah, I wouldn't want to be Arvin in this situation. Game Freak really tried in this game's stories, bringing it very close to black and white for me. I'd even go to say that the line for that has been crossed several times already. Some examples being black and white with Getsis or N, or X and Y with the Great Pokemon War. What I'm trying to say is, keep doing this type of thing, Game Freak. It makes these stories actually interesting, and more than just a part of the game that I just mash A through. What? I'm missing something. Oh, how does the game run? Oh, it's still fucking dog shit. If you want to see Pokemon Challenge runs, click the playlist on the left. For my last Scarlet and Violet video, click the video on your right. Thanks for watching.